For me, the best thing about Throne of Liberty is the ability to play any weapon on any character. You can literally combine all the different weapons, getting a full set of the different skills and mixing and matching how you please. This ultimately allows for a huge diversity of playstyles on just one character without the need of a single alt character. However, this does come with the misconception that any weapon can work in any situation. That is definitely not the case. So in this video, I'm going to go over a tier list for PvE and PvP on tank, healer, and damage dealers. Which weapons should you ideally be using in the current meta of Throne and Liberty? I'll have timestamps on the play bar below, and we're going to use this in order to sort the weapons based on a tier, with S being the best and D being not ideal. Now be aware, everything I say may not align with exactly what other people say, and it comes from my over 1,600 hours playing this game, although I will say probably 1,000 of it is spent just recording and editing videos. But I do have experience in all the different weapons except Greatsword. But I've done my research to see what capabilities it has. So let's begin with tank. And where would we put the Greatsword for that? Well, it has a very good kit for tanking. You have abilities which can increase your threat against monsters, deal a ton of damage, and you also have a load of survivability too, including team support. I would safely put Greatsword in A tier for tank. Then we look at the sword and shield, and there's no question here. This is the best weapon for tanking, with its unique stat of shield block chance, and then abilities to massively increase that, generating a load of threat, and putting yourself on top of the target's threat list, along with abilities to support the team and massively improve your own survivability. There's no doubt, if you want to play tank, the best pick is always going to be sword and shield. Then we look at our daggers, and this is not going to be a great fit for a tank. There's just not a whole lot of synergy. As a tank, you're trying to get hit, and going invisible is kind of counterintuitive. I wouldn't say it's impossible to make it work, it's just not ideal. Then you have like the longbow. This is more of a support weapon with the capability to heal and cleanse and support the team with a bit more damage at cooldown reduction, but still it doesn't synergize that well, and again, I wouldn't generally pair it with the sword and shield. Then your crossbow. This does have unique cases, but I would more say you use it as a damage dealer, not really as a tank. Crossbow has a tiny bit of support, but otherwise it's generally about high mobility, high damage output, and so it doesn't really synergize very well for the tank role. I'll have to put it here. Then your staff. This is again primarily a damage weapon, and very good at that. Also being more of a ranged weapon. It has a little bit of team support, but again, I wouldn't put it as very ideal for a tank. Then we have the wand. This has a ton of support with healing output and the ability to apply curses on your enemies, debuffing them and potentially dealing quite a bit of damage. I would say it's in a pretty solid spot to use as tank, but it's not as perfect as combining, say, Greatsword with your sword and shield, due to the nature of team support and survivability buffs you gain. Going with wand, you will lack threat, you won't have as much damage or CC abilities, and you just won't be as good as, say, a true healer, but you can be one of the most survivable classes there is. You just can't really be that impactful. Then there's the spear. This can go pretty well with a tank, providing an absolute ton of multi-target damage here, a load of crowd control resistance, and some extra CC abilities, on top of being able to even fear people. You will end up a bit squishier than other weapon combinations, and I will put it in line with, say, the wand on that level of play. And this would ultimately be my tier list for tank. Both PvE and PvP, the general meta right now for a tank in PvP is always sword and then Greatsword. No questions there, just because of the massive synergy of blood devotion to giving an insane protection to your allies, and then the natural survivability that sword and shield provides with block chance, and the ability to pull enemies where you want them with, say, chain hook. But yes, you can make more off-meta builds work with, say, the wand and the spear, but I wouldn't generally go with, say, dagger, bow, crossbow, or staff if you're looking for a true tank build. Now we're going to jump to healers. You have a look at greatsword, and yeah, there's a little bit of synergy you can get here, particularly with blood devotion. You can stack some of your own survivability, and you can use this to give insane protection to your allies. You just need to make sure you're healing yourself back. So you're going to want to pair it with a pretty good healer weapon, and I'll put this in B tier. Then you have the sword and shield, and this can go pretty neatly with some team support and CC abilities. But I would probably say it's less ideal than the greatsword, so we'll put it in C tier. Then you have the daggers, and well, there's again not a lot going here that's going to help with healing. One thing though is, yes, you can go invisible and you can take advantage of guaranteed critical heals. But you again will need to pair it with an actual healer weapon, and I'll just put it in C tier here. Then your bow. This has some huge healing output, and synergized with another healer weapon can literally make you the best healer in the game. You orientate around heal over times with your healing touch, and synergizing that with like Nature's Blessing, Purifying Touch for a cleanse, and Blitz to cast your most powerful abilities like back to back. I will say this is one of the best weapons to use as a healer, but it does just fall behind the best. You generally use it more as a support healer weapon. We then look at crossbow, and well, there's really not much you can use here on healer. And I would definitely say it's not really ideal. There is a niche case where you can combine, say, mana burn with burning time, and then your high hit rate of crossbow. And this is just for PvP to strip the mana of your targets. And I guess you use that more as a healer, as you won't really be doing much damage to your targets. Then we have staff. Yes, this does have some ability like getting mana regen and a little bit of team support here. And I would say it's one of the better weapons to use as a healer, just to support your healing, but again, not the best. And then we have the wand, and yes, no questions, this is the best weapon for healing. You have a load of abilities to do so, ones which can support your team's mana regen, either give them massive protection or more damage gains, cleanses, even more damage gains if you want, or massive area heals. And no doubt, wand is just the best. And you will generally want to pair that with the bow, and then you are the best healer in the game. But we'll have a quick look at spear, and yes, there's again some synergy here, again like using a bit of team support, even a bit of a CC break for your allies, and again combining some extra CC abilities and even fear. I would say you can make it work, but again not as ideal, not as perfect as always just going wand and bow. That's the current meta. And this is ultimately the healer tier list. Again, solely dedicated to healing your allies as much as you can. Maybe I could put Templar, which is your sword and shield, wand combo a bit higher, but I would say if you're running that combo, usually you're just healing yourself, particularly if you're trying to tank. And it just doesn't work that well to keep your allies alive. Mainly because you have to be in the thick of things to take advantage of like sword abilities. And then if you don't have enough defenses, you're just going to be dying so quick. And so you will use a lot of the healing just on yourself rather than your allies, just because you have to stay alive. You're generally better off with a ranged healer who can stand back out of the clumps and generally not take as much pressure, and so be free to heal their allies a bit more. But now we will look for damage dealers. Herein you get a ton more flexibility. All weapons have pretty decent damage outputs, particularly when you combine all the skill specializations you can get through weapon mastery. For example, wand can come a completely damage dealer weapon with the right masteries. But we will look at greatsword first. This one's ultimately a very solid weapon for damage dealing. You're going to combine CC chains and ultimately just nuke your enemies, whether that's in PvE or PvP. Definitely one of the better weapons to use right now for raw damage output. I'm not 100% sure where to put it, either in S tier or A tier. It will depend on the skill of the player and also the opponents you're facing and how geared they are. That's the issue, particularly in PvP. It can be very rock, paper, scissors. However, Greatsword can reliably get enough hit chance to always land their hits on their target. I would say Ravager, when you combine Dagger and Greatsword, is one of the best combos right now for PvP damage. Even in PvE, you still have super solid damage output. I will leave Greatsword in A tier. Then we look at Sword and Shield, and I will say this is not that great for dealing damage. You can support a bit, but ultimately you don't have the sheer hitting power that other weapons can provide. I will just put this one in C or B tier. We'll leave it in B tier. It can go really well with, say, crossbow. Then we have daggers, and there's no question. This weapon nearly can go with any other weapon and just provide huge damage output. In PvP, huge utility with being able to go invisible, immediately disengage from a fight, and even phantom smoke screen to just completely avoid taking the ranged damage. There's no question this is definitely one of the best weapons in the game right now, just to support damage output. Then we look at bow, and I will say this has definitely fallen off pretty hard as of late. It used to be one of the best weapons to use in PvE, and everybody would run this with Deadly Marker, but they since nerfed it. You still want one or two of them in the group, but you can no longer stack them like you could before. Outside of this team support, the raw damage output that bow has is a little bit lacking versus other weapons. You will use it more of a support weapon as a damage dealer. I'll put it here in B tier as well with the sword. Then you have the crossbow, and in PvE right now, it can do super solid, and in PvP, it can completely dominate. I will say it's pretty gear dependent. You will want to either have the Cordy's crossbow for multi-target killing groups of enemies, or the Ackman's Bloodletting crossbow for smaller scale. And with either of those two, crossbow can just be incredibly powerful. I will put it in S tier right now. You can combine it with like a dagger or with sword and shield and do incredibly well. And then we go to staff, and I will also say this is one of the best damage dealers. Again, in PvE and PvP, being able to hit your targets from afar is a huge advantage. You will of course want to position yourself well, and in PvE it can just make dealing with mechanics way easier. You also have a ton of mana regen, so you end up that not being an issue versus a lot of other classes. And yes, you just have some of the hardest hitting damage abilities in the game. No questions there. And I will put it in S tier. Then we have the wand. And since the release of Talandre, this weapon has gotten pretty insane. The new masteries allow you to go super heavily into just raw damage output. And with the ability to have those support skills, you can gain a ton of damage buffs for yourself or even your team. And there's no doubt it is one of the better weapons to use combined with multiple others for huge damage. In PvP, you can combine it with, say, Dagger, Dark Blighter, and just nuke people from a distance. Or you can go Staff and Wand, and that is just the best PvE weapon combo right now, but maybe not the best for PvP. And finally, we have the Spear. This still has pretty much the best multi-target damage here with Javelin Inferno, bouncing those javelins between your targets. You still have some pretty decent team support effects, CC abilities, and the very unique Cataclysm ability to make it so enemies can't use their defense skill, and even having fear. But this is very situational. However, you can use the Spear of Unhinged Horror and just cause havoc amongst your enemies, continually fearing them every time you get kills. So I will also say this is one of the best weapons to use right now for that damage. Even in PvP, getting clumps of enemies and bouncing those spears between your targets is crazy powerful, even though it did get nerfed with the Talandre update. You can combine it with, say, spear dagger, spear greatsword. Both work really, really well. And that is ultimately it for the DPS tier list. You can of course leave your own thoughts and opinions in the comments below. Again, not every weapon combo is going to work the best in every situation. You're going to have to pick and choose. I do not believe it is the intent that every weapon combo work everywhere. You will find healers and tanks complaining that they can't do, say, their solo dungeons that easily. And that's of course going to be the case. Throne and Liberty is a game where you can have one character and you can literally play every single weapon. The game is designed around that flexibility. It is up to you to choose the right weapons for the right situation. Don't expect always what you have chosen to be the best everywhere. Don't expect them all to be balanced either. It is my belief that the devs only intend a weapon to be good with some certain weapon pairings and not all of them. When we looked at how they designed the spear, they deliberately stated that spear would only go really well with, say, greatsword, with staff, and potentially dagger. It isn't meant to be paired with all the other weapons for every single situation. Sometimes a weapon combination is just better for being a tank, another just for being a healer, and yes, quite a few others as damage dealers spread across different situations, multi-target, single target, PvE, PvP. But I hope this was at least somewhat insightful, just to give a brief overview of each of the weapons and how I would rank them. Maybe it can help you decide which to play. There will be an upcoming tournament where it's guild versus guild, and we'll probably see a lot of familiar weapon combos. Parties are comprised of 6 players, and you'll usually see 2 people on greatsword sword as tanks, 2 people on longbow wand as healers, and the other 2 will be either like dagger, greatsword, spear greatsword, spear dagger, crossbow dagger, crossbow sword and shield. I would say damage dealers are probably the most flexible right now. Healers and tanks, it's pretty rigid stuck on greatsword sword for tank and longbow wand for healers, which is kind of unfortunate, but we should be getting new weapons down the road, which maybe will shake that up a bit. So thanks all for watching, and we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.